Welcome to Storyova, a place where forgotten voices find their echo, where ordinary moments turn into unforgettable stories. If you believe that even the smallest call can change a life, you're in the right place. Today, I'm going to tell you a story about a grandmother, a phone, and a series of wrong number calls that were never really wrong at all. It started on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Grandma Eleanor sat in her small kitchen, sunlight stretching across the faded yellow tiles. The house was too quiet. It had been too quiet for 3 years now, ever since her husband passed away. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder these days, almost impatient, as if it were counting down something she couldn't quite name. Her children lived in different cities. Her son Mark was always busy with work. Her daughter Linda called when she remembered, which wasn't often. The grandchildren had grown up and grown distant. Eleanor understood. Life was fast. People had responsibilities. She didn't want to be a burden. Still, the silence pressed against her chest like a heavy book she couldn't put down. That Tuesday, she picked up her old cordless phone and dialed her daughter's number. It rang 5 times before going to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. Instead, she sighed and carefully placed the phone back in its cradle. An hour later, the phone rang. Eleanor startled, nearly dropping her teacup. She hurried to answer it, her heart racing in a way it hadn't in months. "Hello," she said, hope slipping into her voice. There was a pause. Hi, is this Daniel?" a young male voice asked. Eleanor blinked. "No, dear. I'm afraid you have the wrong number." "Oh, I'm so sorry." "That's quite all right." Another pause. Usually, that would be the end of it. A polite goodbye. A click. Silence again. But the young man didn't hang up immediately. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am," he added. "I must have typed the number wrong." "It happens," Eleanor replied gently. "I once sent a birthday card to the wrong address. The poor man wrote back thanking me for the cake recipe." The young man laughed. It was a bright, surprised laugh, the kind that didn't sound forced. "Well, I hope he enjoyed the recipe," he said. "I hope so too." There was another brief silence, but this one felt different. Not awkward. Just shared. "Anyway, I'm really sorry," he said again. "Have a good day, you too, dear." She hung up. And for the first time in a long while, she smiled at the quiet kitchen. 2 days later, the phone rang again. "Hello," she answered. "Hi, is this Daniel?" The same voice asked, though this time there was a playful hint beneath it. Eleanor narrowed her eyes, though he couldn't see her. "I don't believe so," she replied, pretending to sound confused. "Oh dear. I must be terrible with numbers." "You really must be," she said, a small chuckle escaping her lips. "It's me," he admitted. I did dial you on purpose this time." "I hope that's not strange." Eleanor paused. "Strange, perhaps, but also, welcome." "I suppose that depends," she said carefully. "Why did you call?" "Well," he began, sounding slightly embarrassed. "You sounded nice. And I've been having a rough week. When I realized I still had your number in my call log, I thought, maybe I'd say hello." Eleanor's grip on the phone tightened slightly. A rough week. She knew what those felt like. "I see," she said softly. "And how can I help with this rough week?" He hesitated. Then he exhaled deeply. "My girlfriend and I broke up," he admitted. "For years, just gone." Eleanor closed her eyes. Heartbreak had a way of making even the strongest feel small. "That must hurt terribly," she said. "It does." They talked for nearly an hour that evening. He told her about the apartment they had shared, the dog they had planned to adopt, the way everything in his room now felt like a reminder. Eleanor listened. She didn't interrupt much. She didn't offer dramatic advice. She simply listened. And when he finished, she said, "Sometimes, dear, when something leaves, it makes space for something we didn't know we needed." He was quiet for a long moment. "You're really wise, you know that," he said. I've had a lot of time to think, she replied. From that day on, the wrong number calls became a routine. Every Sunday evening at 6, her phone would ring. "Hello, Daniel," she would say. "Still not Daniel," he would answer. His real name was Tyler. He was 26, worked at a small graphic design firm, and lived alone in a busy city that made him feel invisible. He told her about his deadlines, his coworkers, the coffee shop downstairs that always spelled his name wrong. In return, Eleanor told him about her garden, about the roses her husband used to plant, about the way the neighbor's cat kept sneaking onto her porch. They began to fill each other's silences. One evening, Tyler asked, "Do your kids visit often?" Eleanor hesitated. "Oh, they're very busy," she said lightly. "That's not what I asked." She smiled sadly. "No," she admitted. "Not often do they call." "Sometimes." He didn't push further. But the next Sunday, he called on Wednesday too. "Just checking in," he said. "Midweek can be lonely." Eleanor swallowed the lump in her throat. "You're very kind," she told him. "No," he replied. "I just know what it's like." As weeks turned into months, their conversations deepened. She told him about her fears, about forgetting things, about one day falling and no one noticing. He told her about his anxiety, about feeling like he was always running but never arriving anywhere meaningful. They were two people separated by decades, yet somehow standing in the same emotional room. One rainy afternoon, the phone rang at an unusual time. It was Thursday. "Tyler," she answered, her voice immediately concerned. He sounded different. "Hey," he said quietly. "What's wrong?" "I got laid off." The words landed heavily. "Oh dear," they said, "budget cuts." "Nothing personal." "But it feels personal." Eleanor straightened in her chair. "Listen to me," she said firmly, a strength rising in her voice that surprised even her. "A job is something you do. It is not who you are." He didn't respond. "You are kind," she continued. "You are thoughtful. You call an old woman every week just to make sure she isn't lonely. That is who you are." On the other end of the line, Tyler's breath hitched slightly. "Thank you," he whispered. After that call, something shifted. Tyler began applying for jobs with renewed determination. He would call Eleanor after interviews, nervous and hopeful. She would tell him to wear the blue shirt because it made him sound more confident, even though she had never seen it. When he finally got an offer from a small startup, he called her before he called anyone else. "I got it," he shouted. Eleanor laughed, a bright, youthful sound that echoed through the kitchen. "I knew you would," she said proudly. "You believed in me when I didn't." "That's what grandmothers do," she replied before she could stop herself. There was a gentle pause. "Yeah," he said softly. "It is." Winter came. The days grew shorter, colder. One Sunday evening, the phone didn't ring. Eleanor sat by the window, watching snow gather on the branches outside. 6 o'clock passed. Then 6:30. She told herself he was busy. By 8, she felt that old familiar weight pressing on her chest. Maybe he had moved on. Maybe he didn't need her anymore. The next day passed in silence. And the next. On Wednesday afternoon, just as she was convincing herself not to worry, the phone rang. "Hello." She answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hey," Tyler said, sounding exhausted. "I'm so sorry. I've been sick. Flu knocked me out." Relief flooded through her so quickly, it made her dizzy. "You scared me," she admitted. "I'm sorry," he repeated. "I didn't realize how much I'd miss our call until I couldn't make it." She smiled through tears. "I missed it too." Spring arrived with soft green leaves and longer days. One Sunday, Tyler's voice carried an unfamiliar excitement. "I have something to tell you," he said. "I met someone." Eleanor's heart skipped, a strange mix of joy and something bittersweet. "That's wonderful, dear." "Shush." "Different, in a good way." "She listens. She laughs at my terrible jokes." "That's important," Eleanor said. I told her about you. Eleanor blinked. You did. Of course. I said I have this amazing friend who I accidentally called one day and never stopped. Friend. The word warmed her more than the sunlight through the window. Months later, Tyler asked a question that changed everything. Can I come visit you? Eleanor froze. Visit? Yeah, I mean, if that's okay. I'd like to meet you. In person. Make sure you're real. She laughed nervously. I assure you, I'm quite real. Then let me prove it to myself. She hesitated. What if the magic only existed over the phone? What if, in person, the age gap felt too wide? What if she disappointed him? But what if she didn't? I suppose, she said slowly, I could make some tea. 2 weeks later, there was a knock at her door. Eleanor smoothed her sweater, her heart pounding like it hadn't in decades. When she opened the door, a tall young man stood on her porch, holding a small bouquet of daisies. Hi, he said, suddenly shy. Still not Daniel? Tears blurred her vision. Come in, Tyler. They sat at her kitchen table, the same one where she had spent so many afternoons alone. Now, it felt alive. He looked around at the framed photos, the crocheted blankets, the worn wooden cabinets. It's exactly how I imagined, he said. Is that good? It's perfect. They talked for hours, just like on the phone. The conversation flowed easily, naturally. Before he left, Tyler reached into his pocket. I have something for you, he said. He handed her a small, simple smartphone. I know you like your old phone, he added quickly, but this way we can video call, and I can teach you how to use it. Eleanor held the device carefully, as if it were something fragile and sacred. You really want to see my face that often? She teased. Yeah, he said. I do. From then on, the wrong number calls turned into video chats, shared recipes, virtual birthday celebrations. Tyler's girlfriend joined sometimes, waving cheerfully at the screen, and every Sunday at 6, without fail, the phone would ring. Years later, when people asked Tyler how he met his honorary grandmother, he would smile and say, I dialed the wrong number. But Eleanor knew better. Some calls aren't mistakes. Some numbers connect exactly when they're meant to. And in a quiet kitchen, where the clock once sounded too loud, laughter now echoed every week, reminding her that loneliness doesn't always win. Sometimes, all it takes is one wrong call to make everything right. After that first visit, something inside Eleanor changed in a way she couldn't fully explain. The house no longer felt like a waiting room. For years, she had lived as if she were waiting for a call, waiting for a visit, waiting for something to happen that would make the days feel full again. But now, she wasn't waiting. She was expecting. Every Sunday at 6, her new smartphone would light up before it even rang. She had learned how to adjust the volume, how to tap the green button, how to tilt the screen so Tyler didn't just see the ceiling fan. The first time they video called, she had panicked and accidentally pointed the camera at her forehead. Wow, Tyler had said dramatically. That's the most intelligent forehead I've ever seen. She had laughed so hard she nearly dropped the phone. Now, months later, she answered like a professional. Good evening, Daniel, she would say with a straight face. Ma'am, I've told you several times. This is a pizza place. You don't sound Italian. I'm working on my accent. The jokes never got old. But beyond the laughter, something deeper was growing. Tyler began visiting once every few months. He would take a bus on Friday evening and stay through Sunday afternoon. He fixed small things around her house, a squeaky cabinet door, a loose step on the porch, a stubborn window that refused to close properly. You don't have to do that, Eleanor would say. I know, he'd reply. I want to. One Saturday morning, while Tyler was replacing a flickering light bulb in the hallway, Eleanor watched him from the doorway. You remind me of someone, she said quietly. Daniel? He asked from the ladder. She smiled. My husband, Tyler carefully climbed down. I hope that's a good thing. It is, she said. He was patient, gentle. He always noticed when something needed fixing, not just in the house, but in people. Tyler didn't joke this time. I'm honored, he said softly. As the seasons turned, their connection became a steady presence in both their lives. Tyler's new job flourished. He found himself more confident, more grounded. He credited Eleanor's steady encouragement, though she insisted she had done nothing special. You listened, he told her once. That's not special. It is, he said. No one listens anymore. They wait for their turn to talk. Meanwhile, Eleanor began to change in ways that surprised even her. She joined a small gardening club at the community center because Tyler had suggested it. You need more people to hear your stories, he had said. At first, she resisted. I'm too old to make new friends. Grandma, he said gently. The first time he had used the word directly to her, you made one by accident. She couldn't argue with that. So she went. The first meeting felt awkward. The women there were kind but already comfortable with one another. Eleanor almost didn't return. But the next Sunday, she told Tyler about it. And, he asked, and I think they liked my rose-cutting tips, she admitted. Of course they did. So I might go again. That's my girl, he cheered. Little by little, her world expanded. But not everything was easy. One evening, her daughter Linda called unexpectedly. Mom, I heard from Mark that you've been spending time with some young man. Eleanor felt a flicker of defensiveness. His name is Tyler. There was a pause on the other end. Mom, you have to be careful. People take advantage of seniors all the time. Eleanor's spine straightened. He has never asked me for a single thing, she said firmly. Except tea. That's not the point. It is the point, Eleanor replied. He calls me, he visits, he listens. Linda sighed. We just don't want you getting hurt. Eleanor softened slightly. I know, dear, but sometimes love doesn't look the way you expect it to. Love? Yes, Eleanor said quietly. There are many kinds. After she hung up, she felt unsettled. When Tyler called that Sunday, she told him about the conversation. I don't want to cause problems, he said immediately. You aren't, she assured him. They just don't understand. Maybe I should talk to them, he offered. She laughed. And say what? Hello, I'm the wrong number who stole your mother's heart. He grinned through the screen. Exactly. Months passed. Tyler's girlfriend, Maya, began joining more of their calls. She was warm and thoughtful, with bright eyes and an easy laugh. The first time Tyler brought her to visit in person, Eleanor had baked her famous apple pie. Maya hugged her at the door. I've heard so much about you, she said. Only the good things, I hope. Mostly, Tyler teased. The three of them spent the weekend playing board games, cooking together, and listening to Eleanor's old vinyl records. The house felt fuller than it had in decades. On Sunday afternoon, as Tyler and Maya prepared to leave, Maya turned to Eleanor. Can I ask you something? Of course. How did you know to trust him? After that first call, Eleanor thought for a moment. I didn't, she admitted. Not completely. But I knew what loneliness sounded like. And I recognized it in his voice. Tyler looked down, blinking rapidly. You saved me, he said quietly. No, Eleanor corrected. We saved each other. Then came the call that changed everything again. It was late at night, far later than Tyler ever called. Eleanor woke to the shrill ringing of her phone. Her heart pounded as she fumbled to answer. Tyler? His voice was shaking. It's Maya. She's been in an accident. Eleanor sat upright in bed. What happened? A car ran a red light. She's in surgery. His breath came in uneven waves. I didn't know who else to call. Eleanor felt that old strength rise within her. I'm here, she said firmly. Tell me where you are. He described the hospital, his voice breaking between sentences. For the next 3 hours, she stayed on the line. She didn't fill the silence unnecessarily. She didn't offer false reassurances. She simply stayed. When a doctor finally came out with good news that Maya would recover, Tyler cried openly. "She's okay," he whispered. "Of course she is," Eleanor replied, tears streaming down her own face. After that night, their bond felt unbreakable. A year later, Tyler called with a different kind of trembling in his voice. "I'm going to ask her to marry me." Eleanor gasped. "Oh, Tyler, I wanted to ask you something first." "What is it?" Would you be there when I propose?" She froze. "Be there. I'll set up a video call. I want you to see it. You're part of this." Her chest tightened with emotion. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." The day of the proposal, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, phone propped carefully against a stack of books. She had even put on her favorite lavender sweater. Tyler took Maya to a quiet park. The autumn leaves framed them in gold. Through the screen, Eleanor watched him kneel. She covered her mouth as Maya's hands flew to her face. When Maya said yes, Tyler lifted the phone slightly and whispered, "She said yes, Grandma, Grandma." This time, the word felt permanent. Years had passed since that first accidental call. Eleanor's hair had grown thinner, her steps slower, but her spirit felt lighter than it had in decades. Tyler and Maya visited often. Sometimes they stayed for holidays. Sometimes just for tea. On her 82nd birthday, Tyler surprised her. He gathered her children, her grandchildren, her gardening friends, and Maya in her backyard. When she stepped outside and saw everyone, she burst into tears. "How did you?" Tyler stepped forward. "I dialed a lot of numbers," he joked. But then he grew serious. "You taught me that family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes it's who answers." Eleanor looked around at the faces, some familiar by blood, others familiar by choice. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel forgotten. She felt seen. That night, as the guests left and the house grew quiet again, Tyler stayed behind. They sat in the kitchen, just like the old days. "Do you ever think about that first call?" he asked. "Sometimes," she admitted. "What if I had double-checked the number?" "Then you would have reached Daniel," she said calmly. And Daniel might not have needed you. And you might not have needed me." He smiled softly. "I'm glad I was careless. So am I." The clock on the wall ticked gently, no longer loud or lonely. Eleanor reached for his hand across the table. "You know," she said, "I used to be afraid of the phone ringing." "Why?" "Because it usually meant bad news. Or telemarketers." He laughed. "But now," she said, squeezing his hand, "it sounds like possibility. And somewhere out there, in a world full of missed connections and wrong numbers, one accidental call had turned into years of laughter, comfort, tears, and love. Not the kind of love that fits neatly into categories, but the kind that answers when you need it most." And every Sunday at 6, without fail, the phone still rang. "Hello, Daniel," Eleanor would say. "Wrong number," Tyler would reply. But they both knew it was the right one all along.